The sequel to Grounded, aptly named Grounded 2, is on the horizon of release, and in today's video, me and Michael will be discussing all the lore you need to know for Grounded 2. Dr. Wendell Tully is initially a scientist who works for a company called Ominant. His inventions fail most of the time, and one of these inventions is the spacer, a shrinking machine. He tests the spacer out on his other failed inventions, scabies and gluon. All of the spacer prototypes unfortunately break down.
Those peers believe the projects are a grand waste of time and quickly report to the higher-ups, which grabs the attention of the main antagonist, Director Smector. The higher-ups request a demonstration of the spacer, and conveniently, the spacer works on a pair of dice Tully had bought for his son Thor. However, when Tully presents the spacer to the higher-ups, the machine malfunctions and they fire Tully on the spot, both due to the failure and the resentment Smector held towards Tully.
Tully, enraged by Ominant's decision, throws out his pink slip and Ominant logs about the spacer. He finds new work at a high school, becoming a substitute teacher, most likely for science. Now that he has a new job, he begins to invest his free time into the spacer and eventually discovers why it failed, a particle that can disrupt certain electronic frequencies, which he names raw science.
Raw science interferes with the spacer's functionality. It's also the currency we find around the yard, used to purchase pictures, mutations, ASL terminals, and the item duper. It even has a catchy jingle when collected.
Raw science!
Now that he knows raw science affects the spacer's shrinking process, he's able to shrink and embiggen items like the scabies, his robot assistant Burgle, and even himself. Wendell begins to set up labs across the yard, which are in the following order: the Hedge Lab, the Koi Pond Lab, the Haze Lab, the Black Anthill Lab, and lastly, the Undershed Lab. The Oak and Stump Lab appear to have little to no significance concerning Dr. Tully, so we left them out.
Wendell worries that the structural integrity of the labs is poor and that they will break down due to the subpar manufacturing job Ominant does, as the materials were unused chemistry sets meant for children.
Wendell sets up the Hedge Lab first. The lab is quickly damaged when, while playing with a flying disc, his kids throw it into the hedge, damaging the lab and allowing an invasion of Orb Weaver Juniors and Spiderlings. Due to this problem, Tully reprograms robots named Taze T's to defend the lab. They were initially used for grilling, but now are repurposed. The variants found in the Hedge Lab are the Ruz T's, a rusty version of the Taze T's. Another invention Tully makes is the zippers, raw science-infused silk rope used as zip lines.
To the misfortune of Dr. Tully, he is eventually forced to abandon the Hedge Lab, as the threat of spiders becomes too serious. They begin to invade more frequently, and a new threat appears, the spider broodmother, who sets up her nest in the hedge.
Tully also begins to intercept unfamiliar frequencies from across the yard, which are coming from a field team Ominant sent to spy on Tully. We know this because we can find various skeletons with Ominant badges that can be picked up and used as trinkets. Also, it was stated by Mrs. Ominant, an unnamed Ominant scientist in the dream sequence cutscenes, that they were unaware of Tully's whereabouts as the field team comms went dark.
The second lab Dr. Tully builds is the Koi Pond Lab, located in the depths of the pond itself. This lab is used primarily to experiment on and grow Brussels sprouts. Why Brussels sprouts? Simply because Tully has a deep love for the vegetable.
While working on the pond lab, Tully goes to a doctor's appointment and learns about the disturbing side effects of the spacer, something known as raisoning. It's a byproduct of shrinking yourself repeatedly with the spacer. According to the doctor, Tully has the help of someone 20 years older than his actual age.
Does this stop him from continuing his research? You might think it would. After all, it poses a serious threat to his health. But no, he doesn't.
Tully continues pouring nearly all of his time into his work. His obsession leads to an argument with his wife Trudy, after he skips Thanksgiving dinner to stay in the lab. As a result, Trudy leaves him and takes the kids with her. In a heartbreaking detail, you can find Trudy's wedding ring discarded in the koi pond, left behind when she abandoned Tully.
Despite this personal loss, Tully presses forward and begins the Hams test, an experiment where he infuses Brussels sprouts with raw science. The result is a hybrid between human muscle tissue and a Brussels sprout, which he calls muscle sprouts.
The initial trial is a success. However, the next phase, enlarging the muscle sprouts using the spacer, proves to be a failure. The sprouts either grow without any water content, killing the plant instantly, or they rot away shortly after being enlarged.
Still determined, Tully pitches the miniaturized muscle sprouts to a company called Mouthtown, the same company behind the candies and juice boxes scattered throughout the yard. Mouthtown shows interest, proposing to use the sprouts in a cereal product.
But Tully, believing the muscle sprouts are destined for something greater, declines the offer. Also, a new variant of the Taste Tea is down in the depths, called the Arc R. They shoot electric balls at the player rather than melee, like the Taste Teas and Rusties.
The next lab is the Haze Lab. Tully builds the Haze Lab to find a method to reverse the raisioning process by merging raw science and mushrooms to potentially find a cure. He tries to reverse the age of mushroom cells, as mushrooms live very long, and if he can reverse the cell age of mushrooms, he might be able to do it to himself. This lab only holds the basic variant of the Taste Tea, as it holds no special variant like the others.
Phase 2 of the tests goes incredibly well, but Phase 3 goes horribly wrong. Tully accidentally creates infectious mushrooms that has the ability to control insects, injecting their conscious into a hive mind, turning them into zombie-like creatures with a hypnotic look in their eyes. The fungus also becomes very explosive.
Eventually, the fungus breaches lab containment and infects the area now known as the Haze. With no other choice, Tully abandons the Haze lab and puts it into a quarantine as a last-ditch effort. He busts open a can of weed killer, hoping the infection will be destroyed, but it only ends up being contained within the Haze.
If the player decides to patch up the haze gas leak with a piece of gum, the infection spreads throughout the yard. This allows powerful new enemies to appear, including the infected broodmother and the infected wood spider. Also, Tully feels remorseful about choosing his work over his family.
One of the last two labs is the Black Ant Hill lab. Tully wants to continue his experiments with raw science but is running low and needs more to fuse experiments. He decides to invent mixers for mass raw science production. These mixers can be found in the Black Ant Hill lab, which showcase the empty variants. The mixers are very disturbing to the fauna of the yard, and this causes the black ants to raid Tully's lab. Due to this raid, Wendell begins to spread the mixers around the yard in places that are easy to defend. He uses another tasty variant that is referred to as the assistant manager to defend the lab with multiple regular tasties. Lastly, he backs up Burgle's memory to multiple chips just in case anything happens. The chips were split between two categories. He backs up Burgle's memory to multiple chips just in case if anything happens. The chips were split between two categories: super chips, which Tully hid, and auxiliary chips that Burgle hid. The super chips are mostly lab exclusive, while the auxiliary chips are found in more random locations. Wendell also begins to become way more paranoid about the people watching him, so he locks the lab down and considers giving up as he feels defeated.
The last lab is the undershed lab. In the undershed lab, Hoops, Max, Pete, and Willow find Tully in a floating machine in cryostasis, as the raisioning had worsened to the point he was just a head and was soaking in an orange liquid to keep himself from drying out completely. He moved down to the undershed because he needed a place that would keep all of his raw science cool and out of the sun for his final experiments. Tully becomes very depressed and laments abandoning his family for his science work. He starts to miss their behaviors and talks about how his son Thor would randomly obsess over things. The latest of Thor's obsessions was mants from minotaurs and mazes. Wendell sees a potential idea with the mant creature but shrugs it off and begins injecting himself with raw science, which does nothing. Later, he begins the Project Mant, creating a mant with all of his past inventions like zipper fiber, muscle sprouts, and the haze fungus. After multiple tests, Tully begins to transfer his mind to the mant, but the instincts of the creature rejects Wendell's mind, and now the mant becomes sentient. This is when he locks himself in cryostasis, so Ominant will never obtain his secrets.
If the player achieves the good ending of the game, Tully is able to become big again and is cured of his raisioning. He reunites with his kids and wife Trudy, and he gets the recognition he finally wanted for so long. The good ending is the canon ending of the game, but if you get the bad ending, Wendell is not cured of his raisioning and only has a little time left to live. The good ending is achieved by defeating Director Schmechter's robot that resides in the Orc Lab at the bottom of the Castle Muldork.
Director Dalton Schmetter is the main antagonist of Grounded. He is responsible for the kidnapping and tricking of the four main characters, Hoops, Willow, Matt, and Pete. Players first encounter Schmetter in dream sequences that can be triggered by sleeping.
Schmechter is also behind the shrinking of 5 other children. One of these children were miniaturized alongside the main cast but woke up earlier. They attempted to find a safe place for the others as they were in a deep sleep and couldn't be woken up. We can find their lean-to and a note that is half torn under the porch of the house. They were being pursued by spiders, and their note entails them being confused on how they ended up in the yard, and how they regret not staying at the kids' case as it was safer than where they were currently. They say they need to find a safe place soon, but the note was unfinished, cutting off at a certain point, showing they were found. They most likely punched the spider that found them and hightailed it out of there, as the Deuce's trinket is found along with the lean-to and the note. The trinket gives a speed boost after inflicting damage to a spider. They may have survived their encounter, escaping to an unknown location, or they met their end at the hands of the yard fauna. The other 4 children are shown on a missing person notice on the squirts milk carton, found in the flooded zone. Schmechter had ordered the termination of all shrunken children.
Fortunately, our handlers referred to here as Mr. and Mrs. Ominant scientists felt enough empathy to secretly send us to Dr. Tully's backyard in hopes he could help reverse the shrinking process. The other 4 children likely weren't as lucky and were quietly disposed of.
Schmechter began his career as a regular employee at Ominant, but rose through the ranks by stealing ideas from others, especially from Dr. Wendell Tully. He observed Tully's spacer project from a distance, never acknowledging its true potential until after Tully failed and was fired. Schmechter then created his own spacer device with Ominant, but ran into the same raising issue, an effect of shrinking over time.
Believing that youth might resist the effects of reasoning, Schmechter kidnapped the children and experimented on them. He discovered they were, in fact, immune. However, he faced a major roadblock. He couldn't figure out how Tully reverted the things he shrank back to their original size.
Schmechter also developed Project Orc, which involves mind-control devices capable of taking over simple creatures like the backyard bugs. He sent Orc-controlled red fire ants, Weaver Juniors, and Barbary beetles after the kids, after they rescued Dr. Tully later during the Java-matic defense sequence. When the embiggening cocktail is being brewed, he deploys even more Orc creatures in an attempt to stop them.
Schmechter's robots can be found in the Orc Lab. The lab features various ants fitted with Orc devices, showcasing his experimentation. The final confrontation takes place in the boss room, which includes turrets firing blue electrical orbs and lasers, as well as a large monitor where Schmechter appears to taunt the kids and Dr. Tully before and during the battle. In between the waves of attacks, Schmechter sends out Orc Weaver Juniors.
He then sends in a remotely controlled robot equipped with a blaster and a screen showing his face. After the kids defeat the robot, it drops the Ominant data disk. The disk contains all of Schmechter's experiment records. In the good ending, the contents of the data disk and the armor that the kids are wearing when they leave is used as evidence to sue Ominant and get Director Schmechter arrested.
The playable characters are named Hoops, Willow, Pete, and Max. They're students who attend the school in the small town of Brook Hollow. The kids were kidnapped by Ominant workers and shrunken down to see if they would be resistant to the raising, a side effect of shrinking. They did prove resistant, but Director Schmechter became impatient because the Ominant scientists couldn't develop a formula to return shrunken objects to their original size. Rather than dispose of the kids as ordered, the scientists felt remorse and secretly sent them into Dr. Wendell Tully's backyard, hoping they might find him and get help.
Before locating Tully, the kids encounter his robot assistant, Burgle, who has lost parts of his memory scattered throughout the yard in the form of data chips. The super chips are hidden in specific labs, while the auxiliary chips are scattered randomly around the yard. The kids take on the task of recovering these chips so Burgle can piece together what happened to Dr. Tully, who has gone missing.
Eventually, the kids complete every lab and find Wendell Tully himself, now in a heavily raisin state. Wendell helps them by giving them grilled science and the recipe for the embiggening cocktail. Canonically, the kids are shown to defeat both the Mantis and Brood Mother bosses, as Pete is seen wearing the Assassin armor set, gear that can only be crafted by defeating the Mantis, using Mantis kebabs crafted partly from Brood Mother parts to summon it.
In the end, the kids expose Director Schmechter's schemes, leading to his arrest. Later, they reappear in Grounded 2 with updated looks. In the sequel's opening, they attend a ceremony at Brook Hollow Community Park, hosted by a reformed Ominant, now with the new director Sloan Beaumont, but an unexplained explosion occurs, shrinking them once again.